Hey everyone, I was asked to do a quick teaching on Sabbath. I hope you guys had a really great Easter, and I wanted to share with you some tips and tricks that I have learned about what Sabbath is and what Sabbath isn't. If you feel like I already have Sabbath down, I go to church on Sunday, I hang out with young adult group, and I go grocery shopping and then chill at the house. Well, yes, a lot of us Christians practice Sabbath that way, but I want to open your mind to maybe some new ways that you've never ever Sabbath before. Maybe blow your mind with what Sabbath actually means and what we can, how we can experience God in Sabbath. So I wanted to start out with Exodus 20, 8 through 11, which says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is Sabbath to the Lord your God." Well, what does Sabbath even mean? So I did some research on what Sabbath means, and the word Sabbath traces back to the Hebrew word Shabbath, which means rest. So Sabbath literally means rest. Well, what is rest? Because for a lot of us, it means something different, right? So the actual definition of rest is in three parts. The first one is to cease work or movement in order to relax, refresh, or recover one's strength. So, some spiritual alliteration here. We need to cease work in order to refresh our relationship with God. And refresh means to restore and renew, and restore means to bring back into existence or use or back into its original state. So when we're resting with God, we're actually going back to our original state in which He designed us to be, which is in relationship with Him. And then renew means to make like new, right? So when we're resting with Him, we're actually making like new our relationship with Him on the Sabbath. And then the second definition of rest is be placed or supported so as to stay in a specific position. So like if you rest your arm on something, you're putting faith that that thing is going to be able to carry your weight, right? And so in the same way, spiritually, we need to be able to place ourselves in a position completely dependent on God. Putting our full weight into something takes faith that it will hold you up. So put yourself into a position to extend your full faith in Him who supports you. And then the third definition of rest is to be based or grounded in and to depend on. So we need to have our Sabbath day as a day of renewal to be grounded in Him and to remind ourselves that we're dependent on Him. Because it's really easy during the work week to become independent on ourselves again, saying, I'm doing all this work, I'm providing for myself, I'm doing all these things. And the day of Sabbath is to remind us, hey, actually, we're dependent on God. God is the one that gave you that job. God is the one that has provided for you or given you scholarship for school that actually wasn't of your own earning or doing, but that's purely from His grace. So that is the definition of rest, which is Sabbath. And I wanted to extend 5 characteristics of what Sabbath is and then talk about some things of what Sabbath isn't. Sorry, my phone's a little wonky right now. But so 5 characteristics of Sabbath. 1 is it's an act of trust. Actively setting apart one day to spend time and rest with God is an act of trust that He can do more with your 6 days than you could do with all 7 days together. And so let's say you do have a busy schedule or a busy week and you say, no, I really need that 7th day to at least do X, Y, and Z. God is saying, do you trust and have faith that spending a day with me, even if you don't have all of your things on your to-do list done, that I will provide you and multiply your time outside of your time with me so that you can be able to get that done? So the first characteristic, an act of trust. The second characteristic is it's a day set apart. Literally holy. The word holy means set apart. And so when you're setting something apart once a week, you're actually realigning your priority to be God and saying, God, you're actually a priority in my life and I need to remind myself of that. And so I'm going to dedicate a whole day just to you so I can realign my priorities in my life. 3 is that it's godly rest. And I'm not just talking about rest like, oh, I'm going to sit and chill and watch Netflix and just binge and just be a vegetable and be mindless because my job just requires a lot of mental capacity, right? That's actually not godly rest. Godly rest is actually being with Him instead of doing. And so even when we're going around doing all these things on Sunday, the Sabbath, for God, It's actually not, unless we're having a personal connection and interaction with him, it's not really godly rest for our souls and for our relationship with him. And so the focus is being with him over doing. So maybe meditating on a verse, sitting for 5 minutes in silence, like reminding yourself that you're a child of God and speaking I am statements over yourself, being in nature and just reveling in his nature, right? Which leads me to point 4, is spending time with him. So find out what are some ways that you connect with the Lord. For me, it's painting. I love to paint in my backyard and do acrylic work and just really focus my mind on being a creator. Like, we're made in God's image, so he made us to create. And so like, if God has given you a talent or passion to create, whether it's music, playing the piano, doing yoga, biking, whatever it might look like, whatever you can create, whatever you can do in spending the time with the Lord, that you feel rested and you just feel connected to him, find those different activities that really that you really revel with the Lord. And then 5 is that it's not legalistic. So Sabbath looks different for everyone because everyone connects with him differently. So furthermore, Sabbath doesn't mean that we rest from bringing the kingdom. Everyone knows that Jesus, even on the Sabbath, the Pharisees like condemned him, saying, "Why are you doing work on the Sabbath?" And Jesus is like, dude, like if your ox was like down in a ditch, wouldn't you go get it? Like you can still like reach your hand out and be a helping hand to those around you. And so it's not like, oh, well, I have to like not go to church on Sunday, not do anything, not move a muscle. In the Jewish like tradition, like they have rules and regulations that you like can't go within a certain feet from your house, or like use the elevator button, like really, really small things that they're like, that's work. And so it's not to be legalistic, but it's to remember that you can still bring kingdom on the rest day, but we're just setting it apart for the Lord and for us to realign our priorities with him. So that was a lot. Again, the 5 characteristics: an act of trust, a day set apart, godly rest, spending time with him, and non-legalistic, right? So furthermore, what it's not, this is actually really important because I fell into this a lot. Simply not being unproductive, simply being unproductive. So like I said, if you're like reading a secular book or binging on Netflix or doing work in the yard, like maybe work in the yard is restful for you and you connect with the Lord, but other people, that's work. So that's why I say it looks different from everyone, because like it could be the exact same activity, but for someone they're not connecting with the Lord and it's work for them and it's draining, and another person, they connect with the Lord in that way and it brings them life and it connects them to the Lord. So number 1, simply being unproductive. Number 2, rest without God. So again, that emphasis of like you're resting, but it's not with the Lord. And then 3, being busy for God. And I think all of us Christians are really, really good at this, being busy for God on the Sabbath. We go to church, we volunteer and participate in a program, we attend our young adult group, we go out and we do all these errands that we need to run, and then we go to the house and then we like veg out, right? And so really this video, I want it to be like something that you can use to transform your Sabbath. And so the very last thing I just want to talk to you about Sabbath is actually giving you an activation piece for this. And so I don't want you to just watch this video and say, oh, that was nice, like I'll think about that. But I want to actually challenge you to be activated in this moment. So if you have a pen and a paper, or if you have your calendar out, I want you to take a look at it. And I want you to pick a day that you're dedicated to making your Sabbath. Maybe Sunday's not that day. Maybe you work over the weekends. And I understand that with quarantine and everything, everyone's schedules look super wonky. But think about your normal schedule on a normal day, and what would be a day to Sabbath. Maybe it's different every week. Maybe you don't have a set schedule. Maybe Monday's your day to have Sabbath with the Lord. It doesn't necessarily have to be Sunday, but I'm not saying don't go to church on Sunday. For sure, go to church on Sunday. That's corporate worship. That's corporate time to be together and have fellowship. But don't forget that Sabbath is strictly set apart for you and the Lord. And then number 2, write down some ways that you connect with the Lord and find rest in him. So like I said, for me, it was like painting or playing piano or being in nature. So those are just some ideas. Go ahead and write down some ideas that you have of how you connect with the Lord. And then this one is so important. Number 3, set boundaries to protect your Sabbath. I kid you not, it is so difficult to protect your Sabbath, especially if it's not a Sunday, or especially if it is the weekend, because it is your one day to be able to rest and whatnot. And so setting boundaries. So for me, like, I literally have to block it off on my calendar and say like Sabbath, and then people are like, what are you doing on Sunday or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I can't hang out that day, and they'll be like, why? And I'm like, oh, it's my Sabbath, and they're like, so we can't hang out because you're doing nothing. It's a really weird concept for especially not Christians. But protecting your Sabbath, say, no, actually, it's not that I'm not doing anything, but that's my one day that it's set apart to be with the Lord. And you can actually open up beautiful conversations that way, and even inspire and convict other people of where their priorities are at if they do have a relationship with the Lord. But setting those boundaries and keeping it on your calendar as a reoccurring event. So that's my last activation piece. Put it in your calendar as a recurring event. I know that was a lot, and I don't feel like I maybe breathed at all during this video, but I just really wanted to pack as much into it as I possibly could, and it's really hard. Be encouraged that if you get in a routine of you're like, oh, I've had like 5 Sabbaths in a row for the past 5 weeks, like completely blocked off, spent time with the Lord, and then you start like compromising in your Sabbath, and it turns into a half day of Sabbath, or it turns into a morning of Sabbath or something. Like, stop. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself grace, and then hit the reset button. Get tight about your boundaries again. And continue to like press forward to be in relationship with God, which I'm sure are all the other connection pieces that we're doing in this series for connecting with Jesus. So thanks for connecting with Jesus in Sabbath and tuning into this video. Bye, guys.